Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. How you doing, Alaska? Everything okay? I understand the tsunami warning has been lifted for much of Alaska, but then again, it's hard to understand anything in the morning. Not 100% positive on that, but gigantic earthquake off Kodiak, Alaska, 8-point-something, I think, and all our Alaska friends in the low-lying areas evacuating their homes, heading to high ground under tsunami warning. But it sounds like everything went the other way somehow. But lots of reports this morning from those on the ground in Alaska of the tide going out and the channels emptying and just tensely waiting for something like a 10-meter swell to show up. And so far it hasn't. Thankfully, that's good. That only means, I guess, though, that it's heading elsewhere, but has perhaps some chance to dissipate. I don't know how these tsunami things work. I don't live in a tsunami danger region at the moment, of course. Once the polar ice caps melt, I suppose everything changes. So who knows? Shannon Moore, of course, our good friend on the ground there in Homer, Alaska, tweeting early this morning, pre-dawn, I think it's always pre-dawn in Alaska, I suppose, in midwinter, that she was on her way out the door and hanging on tensely. So good luck to, everyone there, of course, and Shannon in particular. Hope all is well. Hope you can get back on the air and broadcast again and do your radio show and all the things you do high and dry. Fingers crossed for you. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Bill tells us all the way from high and dry Portland, Maine. I don't know. It might be raining there. That's not a tsunami, right? We can count on good weather, I think. Who knows? It's very warm here. Daily Coast Radio is live here in the warmth. Kagro X, hi, that's me, David Waldman, got snubbed on the Oscar nominations for the 90th straight year. I haven't even been directing that long, to be honest, so it's quite a snub. Call your member of Congress and fight this injustice. There's any number of injustices we could be calling and fighting today, and we'll have to talk about some of those too. Take some time, I suppose, to absorb things. On the end of the shutdown yesterday, they did have their vote successfully. It took them several hours longer than just the noon vote that was being talked about during yesterday's show. Varying ways, lots of different channels into which you could fit yourself in analyzing what happened yesterday. Here we'll have to take our wait-and-see attitude, but of course, much anger, and rightfully so, among the immigration, those who place that as their top priority. Of course, it is worth mentioning that several million children who depended for their health care on the CHIP program probably think it's kind of maybe sort of an okay deal too. Lots to consider and all of that, and it's understandable. There have been people have been working, of course, on the immigration issue since forever, and it is, of course, for many people, their entire actual lives wrapped up in one neat little package through which they either remain in the United States or have everything turned upside down that they've ever known, and you're not going to be able to, dissuade them from seeing that particular issue as the most important, as you rarely are with almost any issue, but this one in particular. We're forced to lean on technicalities like, at the moment, the DACA program, still in place, but of course you're under huge threat, and that could all change very soon. And the program is technically in place, but they're snatching people off the streets and deporting them. I wouldn't get too comfortable. I don't need to tell you that, of course. But lots of disappointment, but lots of nuance to the story overall from the 50,000-foot view. We'll have another chance at this again, and it's very difficult to dispute those of you who are concerned that perhaps this is a signal that they won't fight very hard, that they will give up again or pack up their tents and walk away from a shutdown fight very quickly. I don't know if I would have counseled taking care of, wrapping up the whole business yesterday immediately as soon as the compromise hit the floor. But that's a tactical debate, and we'll have to have it and see how things play out. And we don't have to wait very long to do it either, because 3 weeks we'll be right back here where we were before. But lots of good points made yesterday on the show. Plenty of good points made out there in the wider world as well to counter some of those things. But it's very possible that for some Democratic senators, and in particular, as we mentioned, Doug Jones, if the chip issue is put aside, then he's delivered on his chief promise and can approach the next shutdown fight as a team player, we hope. Now, of course, there's always every chance that Mitch McConnell comes through and has his vote, but the House, of course, as predicted, not at all committed to any sort of a deal. Very likely where anything that the Senate could agree to would die in the House, and by design, and everybody knows it. And so I don't know. We really have to digest what's been done, what's been written, and of course, lots more coming out from the details of the CR, things that have been hidden in there for us to find, like evil Easter eggs. And I'm sure it won't look any better in 3 weeks either. All right. Well, let's see. Where do you want to start today? Shall we start with Pocket, now that we've updated you on the tsunami issue and noted, at least for the record, the fact that the shutdown is over? There's plenty to look at, both in Pocket and in the morning's Twitter feed. Let's see. When we left off yesterday, one of the issues I promised for consideration today, another McClatchy dispatch. Always worth checking in with McClatchy. I made brief mention of it. I sent the article to Scott for inclusion in yesterday's summary, but let's summarize the article itself. Anita Kumar and Ben Weider, how does he say that? Wieder. After a year, top Trump staffers still working without certified financial disclosures. And what's the point, really, right? Overnight, there was an addition to this, which I'll have to pull out of the Twitter feed this morning. But Ryan Zinke, Stinky Zinke, as many of you are calling him, back in the news. Still, he's not going to give up easily in the race for most corrupt cabinet secretary. I got to give him credit as a scrappy interior secretary, trying to stay on top of that steaming pile of garbage that is the Trump cabinet, is no small feat. And to do it from the interior secretary position is a challenge, and we salute you for it, sir. Zinke, we'll throw his bit in afterwards. Let's check in on the McClatchy article. After a year, top Trump staffers still working without certified financial disclosures. And why should they work with certified financial disclosures? There's no law. LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. I know Greg disagrees, but I'm going to throw this. I think some of this stuff belongs in the nothing matters file correctly. When do you think we're going to have time to get around to Dina Powell's half-assed effort at financial disclosure? We might get around to Jared Kushner's, but when do we get down to the Dina Powell level, especially if she's moved on from her office, if Zinke is gone shortly, as I suppose it's possible he might be, if in fact Donald Trump is really annoyed with him, but that annoyance usually lasts about, at most, 2 weeks. Everything lasts 2 weeks for Donald Trump. What do we got here? Heading back to the McClatchy article. A year into Donald Trump's presidency, records show 5 of his top staffers still have not secured final approval of their financial reports, disclosures that are required by law to ensure Americans that these senior officials aren't personally benefiting from their White House jobs. And that's That's probably the way to view the issue, the way I am looking at it. It's required by law, but what do you really mean? Like you say, it's required by law, and yet they haven't done it for a year, and they're top officials, drawing pay, making policy, influencing policy outside of their areas, telling the president what to do, running his day-to-day affairs, because God knows he's not doing anything about it. But it's illegal. But it's never anything like you and I. Well, maybe not you and I. We're, I think, smarter than that. But your average lay person on the street, like, you tell them that's illegal. They think, well, does that mean that all the policies that that person has implemented are invalid and rolled back and erased from the books? No. They just stand, and we shake our fist and say, illegal thing that you're doing, why you, I oughta, and then we write articles, and McClatchy writes them, and we read them, and we, like that, we do the little tremolo on our voice, shake our fists, and, man, that's illegal, and then that's it. Another 4 staffers received certification by the Office of Government Ethics after McClatchy first requested their forms last month. So we're talking about 5 still haven't got it. 4 others didn't have it last month, and only McClatchy, I guess, thought to say, by the way, it's nearing a year into the Trump administration, and 9 or 10 top Trump staffers, we have no effing clue whatsoever what financial conflicts they may have, and keeping in mind that Donald Trump drew his inner circle and top staffers and his cabinet, etc., from the ranks of really rich people that I know, or maybe a friend of my daughter's or whatever, then they're likely to have a lot of entanglements. This administration more so than perhaps any other in history. Why not? Let's just say it. In the history of China, even, it's the worst. The delay is likely due to Trump staffers either refusing to disclose mandated information to OGE. I just refuse. I'm not doing it. It's mandated. It's required by law. Yeah. Pfft, what do you mean? Cops are going to kill me, mandated by law? Or I'm going to look bad in the papers? Or you're all going to forget and only McClatchy is going to remember, but everybody's like, what is McClatchy anyway? Is there can I pick up the McClatchy Times somewhere? Where does this stuff get printed? Oh, I don't know. All right, then. How about no, kiss my ass, I'm not disclosing anything? Well, that is illegal. One question from my lawyer here. Is it more illegal if I say, kiss my ass, you'll never see it in your lifetime, go jump in a lake? Or should I say, 2 weeks, it's coming. The dog ate it, something like that. Is it any less illegal if I say that? No. All right, then, kiss my ass. How about that? Okay, we'll see how long that lasts. Well, 4 years or so, they'll probably catch up with you. But by that time, we're gone, right? Yeah. All right, then. Commence with the kiss my ass release. Go ahead. The delay is likely due to Trump staffers not giving a crap one way or the other what we think about these things. I'm editorializing a little bit. Failing to resolve a conflict of interest or violating an ethics law or regulation, according to 2 ethics experts familiar with the longstanding process. All of these refusals violate laws, according to 2 experts. So there you go. 2 experts say that's illegal. Take it to the bank, I guess. But delays can also occur when White House ethics officials don't force staffers to comply, or because OGE is behind on paperwork. All 3 reasons really suck. Take your pick. The number of Trump staffers without certification a year after inauguration is not normal, according to Walter Schaub, who served as OGE director until he quit in protest in July and joined the campaign legal center. That's a high rate of failure or delay, and those are the ones the White House knows OGE will review, so the problem might be even worse with reports that don't come to OGE, he said. In other words, low-level staffers who never get reviewed because who cares? They're just saying, well, in that case, deal me in, get me some IPOs and some interesting stuff, buy me some Rosneft shares, whatever we want. we'll never be looked at. And even if we are, we'll say, what about Dina Powell? Oh, yeah, right. Never did get to that. The forums are part of an ethics process designed to identify potential conflicts of interest after an examination of staffers' sources of income, assets, and debts. White House spokeswoman Lindsay Walters said the administration is working to get forms certified. I'm working on it. Here I come. Getting ready to work on it. The process of getting a final certification from OGE is lengthy and tedious. That's what the transition is for, but just as it is with presidential nominees, she said, we will continue to work closely with OGE until this process is complete. OGE declined to comment. Now, normally, if you fill your administration with regular people, it's not so bad. As, a normal person is not like, well, I have, 1,000 different investments. I own 19 houses. I bought half of China the other day. Whatever. That doesn't happen with us. But this administration, I guess, got it tough. Ethics experts say the administration has failed to make ethics a priority. Despite the president's repeated pledge to drain the swamp of business as usual in many ways, and he has drained the swamp of business as usual, he's just filled it with twice as much business as usual and made that extremely unusual. From the moment Trump resisted calls to place his vast business holdings in a type of trust he doesn't control or benefit from, his team has disregarded ethics requirements and norms. Why not? The president's getting away with it, so will I. I don't know if that's really true. He might throw you under the bus and then buy shares in a bus company. But, so what? Wait and see. Maybe he'll pardon you. Why not? For example, here's an example of how everybody else F's off with their ethics because the president does. Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump, and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, both of whom are top aides in the White House. Whatever that's supposed to mean. It means you get in a picture on during the government closure. When Donald Trump comes down the stairs, his hairdresser having been laid off, he comes down in a baseball hat. By the way, no complaints about that, I noticed yesterday. Tan suit. Oh my God. Jeans. What? You're disrespecting the office. Baseball hat inside. I couldn't even get away with that in school when I was a kid. This guy, Oval Office, baseball hat, and of course, lots of you making fun of his completely empty desk, the Resolute desk. Now that we know why that is called the Resolute desk, we can use it more comfortably. Nothing but a telephone, positioned, by the way, too far away for him to even comfortably sit in his own chair and actually speak on the phone. A nice staged photo. I'm surprised he wasn't holding the receiver upside down. But that's not where I was going. We're talking about Jared and Ivanka. They were fined for late financial reports, and several top White House staffers, including, for instance, Steve Bannon, failed to file termination reports after being fired last summer. You can hardly blame somebody for not doing the termination paperwork on their own firing, but you're supposed to because illegal, and so not to. And screw that. I'm not going to do it. Whatever. It doesn't really fly. Of course, Jared Kushner has revised his 10,000 times. So, I forgot I had 1 billion shares of something. Oh, I forgot about that $1 billion building. Dang it. Gee whiz, you keep catching me out on these things. The White House has resisted being held accountable for substantive ethics standards, said Kathleen Clark, an ethics lawyer, if that's still a job, who previously worked for the Washington, D.C. government and the Senate Judiciary Committee, and now teaches at Washington University School of Law, which is not in Washington, by the way. There have been repeated instances of the White House resisting holding officials accountable for violating ethics standards. You could say that, yes. As Trump approached the anniversary of his inauguration, McClatchy reviewed the financial disclosure forms of 54 assistants to the president and deputy assistants to the president, the only White House staffers that OGE is charged with certifying. So there's only 54. Think they can handle it in a year? One a week, right? Not done. Is it? You think it's a delay at the OGE? Are they behind on their paperwork, or are these guys just telling them to blow off the work? The reports obtained through multiple public records requests at OGE and the White House include those filed when staffers arrive or depart the White House and when they divested holdings. OGE failed to initially produce records that should have been made public. In addition to the 5 senior staffers who still lack certification, and probably security clearances as well, there's no evidence that a handful of other top staffers, including Bannon, fully divested their financial investments as required by ethics agreements, which are not considered public records. Other staffers submitted forms that raise questions. Dina Powell, there she is, finally making her appearance here, who served as Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategy until January 12th, indicated on her new entrant report that she would divest, here I go, I'm going to divest it, GS Mezzanine Partners 6, whatever that is, GS. Not an immediately obvious set of initials, but and I don't know what that is. Sounds like hedge fund kind of crap, but whatever. GS Mezzanine Partners 6, and that's Roman numerals 6. VI, for those of you playing along at home. She said she would divest them within 120 days of her February 3rd, 2016 appointment. Some transactions do not need to be recorded because of their type or amount, though hers does not appear to qualify for those exceptions. In other words, it's worth too much. Unless she gave the holdings away, she would have been required to file a transaction report indicating she divested. Powell was assessed, late filing fees. What? Oh my God, late filing fees? I can't believe it. Anyway, it didn't really seem to bother anybody there. Where are we with this? Late filing fees. Oh, you know what? I went to hit the button on the dramatic music, and I don't hear it. And that's worrisome to me, because that means I have to worry about our intro and outro music when the time comes. And now you got me nervous. I'm looking to see. No buttons have been pressed today that would have changed anything. So this, excuse this brief interruption as I look around and see if perhaps there's anything missing from my checklist here. But I guess not. I don't see why this would have changed anything, or why I wouldn't be able to get that thing played. There we go. I wonder how that even happened. Well, that sounded pretty dumb. Maybe what I really need is this thing. I got so many sound effects I forget to even use any of them. But I guess this really works for this series here of getting everything wrong and not being able to use the stuff, and then going off into a tangent of, well, why aren't my buttons pressed correctly? Boring! Exactly. Okay, I had that button ready to go. Where were we? Dina Powell was screwing everything up last time I checked. So unless she gave all of her hedge fund holdings, or whatever the hell GS Mezzanine Partners 6 is, away, she was supposed to have filed something indicating that she divested. She didn't, and she was assessed a late filing fee on the 2 transaction reports that she did file. Question: did she pay the late filing fees? If not, what do we do? Do we all just walk around and say, "Oh my God, you didn't pay the thing"? And everybody says, Donald Trump, had sex with a porn star, and she sex spanked him with a magazine with his own face on it. Oh yeah, well, that sounds bad, too. National Security Council spokesman Michael Anton said Powell divested, but he did not answer additional questions about when or why, or where are the documents, or how come you don't have any. He acknowledged her late filings, but blamed them on computer error. Powell did not comment for this story. The computer error is, I didn't start the computer or work on any of the forms. What an error. Christopher Liddell, or Liddell, Liddell, Assistant to the President for Strategic Initiatives, tasked with modernizing government, said, we don't have computers, listed several entities on his certificate of divestiture that never appeared on any transactions reports. The discrepancy could be explained in part by the fact that Liddell received the certificate, which grants tax benefits for sales mandated by ethics agreements, before he filed his financial report. How did he get that? I don't know, because he didn't respond to questions. The White House said he sold them prior to becoming a federal employee or gave his holdings away. We don't know which one. Neither of them, though, requires a transaction report and therefore get lost. And that's that. That's where we stand with that stuff. What about Kushner? Kushner's ethics arrangements have attracted scrutiny from his earliest days in the administration. Kushner initially said he would sell his assets to his brother or to a trust controlled by his mother, according to the New York Times, but the White House and Kushner's attorney did not respond to repeated requests about whether Kushner had finished selling all those assets he was required to divest as part of an ethics agreement. As McClatchy previously reported, he's been assessed late fees twice, I tell you, for his ethics filings and revised his form 39 times, adding millions of dollars worth of previously undisclosed assets, according to the Associated Press. How does it happen? I don't know. Trump, a reality TV host, thank you for telling us that, McClatchy, boasting a vast real estate empire, ignored calls to fully separate from his business interests when he became president. Administration employees have spent money at Trump hotels and resorts, and White House staff have turned in financial disclosure forms late, some incurring fines or not at all. Former staffers Bannon and foreign policy advisor Sebastian Gorka, we forgot to get to this. Sebastian Gorka has an outstanding warrant for his arrest in Hungary story. Oh, well, now you know that story. Anyway, he and Bannon both, you're never going to believe this, they failed to turn in financial reports when they left, providing information about potential conflicts of interest that existed during employment and arrangements for future employment, according to OGE. Bannon, for example, was supposed to sell his $1 million to $5 million stake in the company Cambridge Analytica. Ever heard of it? Well, he didn't tell anybody what he did with it. Weird. We'll be right back after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're getting our feet back underneath us this morning. I noticed that my timer didn't go off correctly either. And, of course, that meant we started our music a little bit late, which is why it's still playing a little bit underneath us. And I might have even talked my way all the way into the break. I was saying that when we last left off, that Steve Bannon was among those who failed for whatever reason, gee whiz, to finish up his financial disclosure reports, including no word on whether or not he actually sold the stake valued at somewhere between $1 and $5 million in Cambridge Analytica, which is sort of important at this stage of the game. But who cares? LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. They will never, ever, ever get to that. That might come up in, some later legal proceedings, perhaps if there's anything that any legal fallout ever from the Mueller investigation, maybe that comes up again. But ultimately, it will be part of the flood the zone strategy to make us all ignore some significant part of the rather significant wrongdoing, administration-wide, campaign-wide, on the Trump team, and we'll have to pick and choose what we focus on. We'll try and throw out as many data points as we can so that we all know exactly how disappointed to be when certain folks don't end up going to jail or being thrown, off the roofs of high buildings or whatever punishment we settle on, if any. We'll all tut-tut very strongly at them, I'm sure. So let's see. Where were we with that? Unclear whether he sold Cambridge Analytica stake. We'll never find out. Austin Evers, former senior counsel in the State Department who is now executive director of American Oversight. What is that even? I don't know. A group founded to hold the Trump administration accountable. Now we know. Because no one else is going to do it. Said financial disclosures protect the integrity of the government. Well, no wonder they aren't going to fill those out. That's ridiculous. Who would think that they were going to help with the integrity of the government? How? They protect the integrity of the government by allowing the public to confirm that no government employee is serving two masters. Well, that's great. I mean, I don't blame you for this, Austin. You followed the rules and you're doing the right kind of thing, and that's very good and all. But here's an issue. They protect the integrity of the government by allowing the public to confirm that no government employee is serving two masters. They're serving two masters. I don't really know how else to put it. And what are you going to do about it? No answer. All right. Well, that's because we haven't actually asked Austin directly, and he's not on the show. But yeah, big deal. I hope they're not serving two masters. They are. Oh, darn it. Is one of the masters Russia? Yes. Oh, this is the worst. I hate this. The Office of Government Ethics is required to destroy records after 6 years, so it's not possible to compare compliance in Trump's administration to that of his predecessors. That is interesting. I guess that also means I only have to survive 6 years, and then they have to destroy my records, and they'll never find out what happened to Cambridge Analytica or anything else. 5 forms have been certified by the White House counsel's office, but not OGE, according to OGE. In other words, the White House counsel says, everything's cool here. And if you wanted like outside opinion on that, you're going to have to wait. Those forms would include those submitted from Sebastian Gorka, who left in August, lawyer Ira Greenstein, I don't know. I'd ask him, but he left. Oh, no, maybe he hasn't left. He may still be there and still not disclosing anything. Keith Kellogg Jr., NSC staff, Chief of Staff and Executive Secretary. Dan Scavino, Director of Social Media. You can tweet him and ask what happened to your form there, dude. And Amy Swanger, perhaps, who heads up the White House's Senate Legislative Affairs team. Good job there, by the way. 3 of the 5 started in January of 2017, 1 in February, and another in March. So it's not because they're new. 4 additional staffers' forms received recent certification after the public records requests were made in December. The form of Gary Cohn, director of the National Economic Council and Trump's chief economic advisor, was certified December 22nd. Took almost a year to get that one done, but at least it's certified. The forms of Joshua Raphael, a former Hollywood publicist who serves as a spokesman for the Office of American Innovation, because Hollywood is huge in innovation, and those of Kushner and Ivanka Trump. I think, by the way, wouldn't that be great? He's the head of the Office of American Innovation, former Hollywood publicist for Fast and Furious 57, here to help us with our innovation. Those of Kushner and Ivanka Trump, as well as Principal Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah, were certified January 3rd, this January 3rd. The form of Mark Short, Director of Legislative Affairs, who was all over the TV during the shutdown, certified January 12th. None of the staffers responded to requests for comment, and they're not likely to either. Matthew Sanderson, a campaign finance lawyer in Washington, described the delay as quite a long time. Thank you, Matthew. That was a good quote. It would be in everyone's best interest, including the public, to get this done, he said. This is the problem with everything, basically. I don't know. I mean, can't lay it at Matthew Sanderson's feet. What is he going to say? This is quite a long time. It would be best if this was done. Thank you. Not, this is the most corrupt bunch of idiots ever. Maybe they're not. Who knows? They destroy all the records. This is not so good. Trump filled the White House with affluent advisors. That's what I was saying. With assets in the millions. About a quarter of the staffers have extremely complex reports, indicating that filers are wealthy, according to the administration, and therefore worthy, according to this administration. Federal law requires certain executive branch employees to file new entrant and termination reports within 30 days. The Attorney General could take civil or criminal action if a staffer fails to file. Filing a report late is punishable by a $200 fine, which I'm sure is super scary for people who have 17 hedge funds to disclose. After OGE receives a new report, a manager assigns the report to an employee to review in 1 business day, and the employee reviews the report and sends questions to the White House within 2 business days, Schaub said. OGE is required by law to review a report in 60 days. Most agencies satisfy OGE's initial and follow-up questions within about 30 days. Some take up to 60 days, Schaub said. With the notable exception of this White House's sloppy ethics officials, sloppy, agency ethics officials just don't tend to let the review of financial disclosure reports drag out, he said. But guess what? They have. And what are you going to do about it? I'll levy a $200 fine against you. Ooh, well, okay, fine, whatever. Maybe $200 is even serious to these guys. What about, like if they don't pay? I mean, they're already in ethics trouble. Does it make it worse? I guess ostensibly, but, like, what do we do about people who are like, oh yeah, did I get charged $200? Well, don't pay that either. I don't know. What happens? Nothing. Usually we have norms that make it difficult to get away with, or when are you going to fire this person who repeatedly ignores ethics requirements? What? Who? Which one of the 95 of them are you talking about? I don't even follow ethics requirements. I don't care. I don't give a damn. What are you going to do? All right, fine. I'm not president. You wish, right? That just keep on keeping on, I guess. The story on Zinke, good old stinky Zinke, is this one. Mother Jones had this story, tweeted it last night. I took note of it, set it aside. Zinke didn't bother disclosing his shares in a gun company that does business with the government. It's a problem, of course, because he didn't disclose it, and it doesn't really matter what they do for a living. He didn't disclose it. The fact that they're doing business with the government only makes it worse. Let's take a look at the full coverage from Mother Jones. Let's just see if, we can find out a little bit about the gun company, what kind of relationship they have with the government, and whether they're based in Whitefish, Montana. Zinke didn't bother disclosing his shares in a gun company that does business with the government. His relationship to Proof Research, and that's in all caps for some reason, Proof Research Incorporated, raises questions of access. Who's writing this one? Itai, first name. Vardy, last name, easier to pronounce, I think. Itai Vardy, let's say. January 22nd piece here. Let's see. A story originally published in the Huffington Post, reproduced here as part of the Climate Desk collaboration. How do you like that? Interior Secretary Ryan Stinky, in little quotes, they didn't do it. I'm adding that. Zinke is a shareholder in, you'll never believe it, a private Montana company that manufactures and sells firearms and advanced weapons materials, a financial interest he did not disclose when nominated last year. It's nice that he invests in local companies. That's not a bad thing. It can create problems, but in general, it's a nice thing to be doing with your money, right? In response to inquiries from HuffPost, both Zinke and the company, Proof Research Incorporated, confirmed the secretary's holdings, though the dollar value placed on them varied, as will happen. Disclosure forms have this very weird system whereby you don't disclose an actual value, because sometimes it's even hard to pin down. But, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's cash. But you still get to report your numbers within a certain range. That's why we get things like Cambridge Analytica holdings for Steve Bannon between $1 and $5 million. They don't distinguish between a $1 million, shares, $1 million in shares, and $5 million in shares. If it's 6, you got to put it in the other category. But I don't know. Not really sure why they do it that way and why the categories are so broad. Didn't used to be a problem. These days, increasingly, it is. Anyway, the dollar value varied as between Zinke's valuation and Proof Research's valuation. This previously undisclosed holding comes to light after numerous decisions in his first year that benefited the hunting and gun industries. Although, is that That's a pretty broad category. If they're hunting and also advanced weapons materials, I'm curious about what that is. Proof Research Incorporated was first established in 2011 in Zinke's hometown of Whitefish, Montana. I was just kidding when I said, let's find out if they're based in Whitefish, Montana. Of course they are, because so much happens in Whitefish. Who knew what was going on in Whitefish? We coastal elites had no idea. It was first established in 2011 under the name Extreme Precision Armaments Incorporated. They love their names like that. Extreme and tactical. Anyway, that's according to State of Montana business records. They do keep them there, by the way. The company specializes in the production of lightweight rifles with high-precision carbon fiber barrels for hunting. That's good. And military applications. That's a little less good, maybe, but I'm sure the military folks like it. And it was born of a merger of 4 smaller firearms and gun parts companies. Were they all from Whitefish? I don't know. It later changed its name to Proof Research Incorporated and moved to the nearby town of Columbia Falls. So they effed right off to Columbia Falls, those ingrates. According to the company's website, its facility in Columbia Falls produces, quote, the world's finest composite barrels, stocks, and complete rifles. Wow. I wonder if that's been certified by the world in any way. Puffery. Everyone's got that disease. A second facility in Dayton, Ohio, makes specialized high-temperature composite materials for the aerospace and defense industries, including components for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter and B-2 stealth bomber. They're into everything. You want a hunting rifle? A rifle? Yeah, sure. That'd be great. Terrific. You want a stealth bomber? It's a little out of my price range, according to my financial disclosure form, which is incomplete, but I might be interested. What do you got? Zinke provided consulting services for the company in 2012, according to local Montana news reports and a disclosure he filed as a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives 2 years later, listing $16,975 in compensation. After winning a House seat in November of 2014, Zinke told a local newspaper that he planned to retain a small stake in Proof Research, quote, because it's a great company. Oh, is that reason enough? I mean, he doesn't have to divest, I guess, right, as a House member? Both Michael Goguen, G-O-G-U-E-N, Goguen, the main investor in Proof Research, and Larry Murphy, the company's CEO, confirmed to HuffPost that Zinke still owns a small percentage of the company's stock, 1,000 shares out of nearly 57 million. That is a relatively small percentage when in the stock game anyway. Presidential nominees for cabinet positions, like Ryan Zinke, must disclose all assets worth $1,000 or more on their executive branch financial disclosure report under the category Other Assets and Income. A review of Zinke's disclosure submitted to the Office of Government Ethics in January of 2017 and certified by then head of the OGE, Walter Schaub, found that Zinke did not disclose an interest in Proof Research. His annual congressional financial disclosure forms from 2015 and 16 also did not list stock in the company. That's weird. Oh, and it's illegal. But what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I got too much to protest. I can't be bothered with this. Because Proof Research is a private company, pinpointing a definitive market value for its stock is somewhat tricky. Goguen, a wealthy former Silicon Valley venture capitalist, who has invested large sums of money in Whitefish area companies for some strange reason, and philanthropic causes, told HuffPost that as the company's primary shareholder, he estimates Zinke's 1,000 shares as, quote, worth less than $2,000 and probably closer to $1,000. Okay, that might explain things. Of course, I guess if Zinke says they're worth 10 cents, then he doesn't have to put them on his form. Murphy said in a phone interview that he estimates the value of Zinke's shares at around $1,000. Goguen later backtracked somewhat on his estimation, qualifying that a previous audit of the company valued one share at 85 cents, which would put the value of Zinke shares at $850. Well, that could put it underneath. I guess that would explain it. Wow. Well, I guess I guess that means it's not illegal. Isn't that terrific? What a fantastic story, Mother Jones. Anyway, I thought it might be a little bit more significant for them to have tweeted that around, but perhaps not. Should we be picking our battles or just put every piece of information we can find out there? I don't know. Why not? Interior Department spokeswoman Heather Swift said that Zinke's shares would be valued at less than $1,000, far below the reporting thresholds for the executive branch, and I guess that's true, though I don't know whether that's a wise threshold. The secretary is committed to the highest ethical standards, starting now, I guess, and his first meeting as secretary was with the department's senior ethics officers, because they couldn't believe this guy, I guess. Let's see. Not much more from the spokesperson there. Beyond disclosure concerns, there's the matter of what access this relationship may grant the company at the Department of Interior. According to Zinke's work calendar, he and his top aides met with a group of Proof Research executives and a company lobbyist on April 11th, 2017. The schedule entry was titled Brief Update of Proof Research. So that is actually a rather more serious question. Is there more discussion of it? Because what business have they got with the Department of Interior? One might wonder. The company's delegation included its president and founder, K.K. Jens, CEO Larry Murphy, Director of Research and Development John Clements, and Brian Kelly of BK Strategies. That sounds like a one-man shop. The company's registered lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Why a lobbyist? Because they make B-2 stealth bomber parts, I guess, over in Dayton, Ohio. The calendar described Kelly as, why? As man about town. And he had a straw boater hat on and a natty bow tie, I'm sure. What kind? A man about town. What? Is that a joke? With an added side note, loves Whitefish, Montana. I guess that's how you get in on a meeting like that with Zinke. Proof Research's most recent business filings with the state of Montana show that Kelly is also a director of the company. And he's also about town. I'm all about town, baby. Murphy told HuffPost in an email that the company periodically seeks out meetings with various public officials to discuss matters of interest to the company, adding that we don't generally comment on the substance of those discussions. In a follow-up phone conversation, Murphy explained that the company met with Zinke last year mainly because of the Montana connection in an attempt to determine whether the secretary knew of any needs in the government for the company's products. They were just on a business trip, fishing for opportunities. And the Interior Secretary, with nothing else to do all day besides make his own challenge coin and raise and lower his own flag, decided to meet with the company in which he owns a small stake and which is based in his home state and used to be based in his hometown, and see if there's any way we can help you out here from the Department of the Interior. Let's see. Rifles. I can't think of anybody who might need any of those, but let's buy 1,000 of them for the Interior Department in case we need to shoot anything in the interior. Murphy said that during the meeting, Zinke primarily listened to the company's executives and requested an update on its operations. The company's top execs visit Washington annually for trade shows, he said, and their D.C. representative will try to organize meetings with public officials while they're in town. Federal lobbying disclosures show Kelly has lobbied the U.S. House of Representatives and Department of Defense on behalf of the company since 2015. Not terribly surprising, I guess. Proof Research has received at least one government contract in the last year, $11.4 million from the Department of Defense to develop an advanced hybrid composite muzzle brake and medium caliber barrels for future weapons systems. Interior spokeswoman Swift didn't respond to questions about Zinke's meeting with Proof or with its execs or lobbyists. Virginia Cantor, Executive Branch Ethics Counsel at the government watchdog Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and former White House associate counsel for Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, said the case raises several red flags. And Zinke loves flags, so that should be good. Of course, the fact that he's got an ownership stake, in addition to all of that, his connection to the company in other ways. He was involved in the 2011 founding of the Montana Firearms Institute, a nonprofit advocacy group to promote the manufacturing of guns in the state. and served as director of the Institute from 2012 until he became Secretary of Interior last year. A local newspaper reported in November 2012 that Proof Research's president, Jens, was involved in establishing that group, and it was Proof Research's marketing manager, Chris Pauley, who replaced Zinke on the board of directors, State Business Records show. While the Institute held annual meetings and banquets in its first 2 years, it doesn't seem to have been very active since then, doesn't have a website or any social media presence. Proof Research's corporate leadership is well connected beyond its relationship with Zinke. Goguen, its top investor, was a partner in the venture capital firm Sequoia Capital until 2 years ago when he departed following a breach of contract lawsuit from a woman who alleged that he had subjected her to, you'll never guess, years of sexual and emotional abuse. Well, he denied them. Oh, and he countersued. So we'll find out. That's all still pending. What do you know? Imagine that. Board chair of Proof Research, Matt Marshall, the CEO of Amnitor, that's the Whitefish-based security company that reportedly approached the Trump administration with a proposal to privatize various sensitive counterterrorism and intelligence operations. Amazing. Everybody knows everybody there in Whitefish. Goguen told HuffPost he was an early investor in Amnitor, which provided security to his estate in Whitefish. Gee whiz. Man, they are hustlers out there. Gotta give them some credit. Another company director, retired Lieutenant General Frank Carney III, a former deputy director for strategic operational planning at the National Counterterrorism Center, currently a member of the advisory board of Tiger Swan, whatever the hell that's supposed to be, a controversial security company that employed military-style counterterrorism measures to thwart opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline. That may be where we've heard of that one before. Didn't ring a bell with me, though. While Proof Research has not formally lobbied the Interior Department, under Zinke, the department has taken substantial action on several fronts to advance the interests of the hunting and firearms industries. Not a surprise, really. On his first day in office, Zinke signed 2 secretarial orders, one lifting the ban on the use of lead ammunition on Fish and Wildlife Service land and waters, because everyone loves lead, and the other for reviewing how to expand access for hunters on public lands. In August, McClatchy reported that Interior officials had appeared to muzzle National Park Service Acting Director Michael Reynolds' objections to several provisions in the NRA-backed legislation that would loosen regulations on hunting within park boundaries. Zinke later announced a proposal to expand hunting opportunities at 10 national wildlife refuges, which, I mean, that's really where you're not supposed to be hunting anybody. It's a refuge, guys. And appointed Susan LaPierre, the wife of Wayne LaPierre of the NRA, to the board of directors of the National Parks Foundation, which receives and administers gifts and real estate bestowed to the National Park Service. These moves prompted the NRA to declare that it has a friend at the Department of Interior in Zinke. What do you know? Pardon me, I had to drop out there for a second. In September, Zinke announced that the Bureau of Land Management would increase access for hunters in the Santa Teresa Wilderness area in Arizona. And in November, the Interior Department announced it would allow trophy hunters to import to the U.S. elephant remnants hunted in Africa. Why did they deal with that? I don't know. After major public outcry, President Trump announced he was putting that decision on hold pending further review. That would be the second time that he had to countermand, or the first of 2 times that he ended up getting annoyed with an overly aggressive Zinke, I guess. These decisions raise questions over the appropriateness of Zinke's continued interest in Proof Research. To the extent he's made decisions to expand hunting and gun carrying on public lands, he has further raised the potential for a conflict of interest, since these decisions may affect the company's fortunes, said Cruz Cantor. Well, all very interesting. And, you have to search rather far afield to make something out of the $1,000 or less holdings in this gun company. Probably more to the point, though, is the rest of the reporting on the weird and chummy connections that everybody has there in Whitefish, Montana, and why all these weird companies end up locating there and knocking on Ryan Zinke's door. That guy is grifting something awful. He's really good at it. No wonder he is a part of this administration, and maybe he's there to stay, despite Trump's annoyance with him. Let's see. What other important pieces of information have we to share? Yes. Well, one thing we won't be able to get into very deeply before our next upcoming top of the hour break, but I thought an interesting thing to share. Put it on the record so that we can share it in the summary, and you can all take a look at it and play around with it. Politico, over the weekend, put out I guess what we'll call an interactive graphic and an article to go with it, because that's what they do. The 270 people connected to the Russia probes. That would be particularly useful for folks like us who like to put names and connections on the record for further evaluation and as background for future stories. Darren Samuelson, Sarah Frostenson, and Jeremy C.F. Lynn collaborating on this one. A Politico analysis of court documents, congressional letters, public testimony, and media reports reveals that the investigations into the 2016 election and its aftermath now involve hundreds of people in Washington, Moscow, and around the world. Some names sound familiar, like Stephen Bannon and Donald Trump Jr., but most don't. Taken together, they illuminate the way federal investigators are assembling the pieces of the Russia puzzle. So they have this nice interactive graphic here of the Team Trump, all of these little squares in red, each of these squares representing a different person involved in some way or another with Team Trump. Their little summary of it here. Let's take a look at Team Trump. 73 associated with this 2016 campaign. 73 people listed here. 44 lawyers. 27 are current or former Trump administration officials. 24 served on a transition team. 12 have ties to the Trump organization. And the more connections that they have among those several bullet points, the deeper red their little square is. We'll talk about that when we come back from this short break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just our short break. Not enough time for me to go and fetch a USB cable with which to recharge my Mac Mini mouse. So hopefully that doesn't die during the show. And once again, if we were like professional and all that, I'd be waving my hands at a producer who would come over and take care of those things, not only during the breaks, but during the show itself. But as it is, we operate on our shoestring budget, thanks to those of you who are participating in contributing to that shoestring budget. We appreciate all that you do, and it's nice to have a little support from those of you out there listening to the show now and again. Thanks again, and I know those of you who listen to the show live and on podcast now are bothered twice per show. Once, though, to contribute to the show, not in monetary terms, but in terms of sending your own recorded pieces to help out, not only giving people a flavor of what's going on in other minds and in other places around the country, but every once in a while providing a much-needed break in the challenge of presenting a show during cold and flu season and when mouse batteries run low. Thanks very much for all that you do. And let's see, when we last left off, we were taking a look at this interactive graphic here. I'm going to kind of go over the various categories of people that they have here. But it's interesting. You'll want to perhaps mouse over some of these squares and get a feel for some of the names and connections in Trump world here, and interactive graphics are always a fun way of doing it. Let's see. The next category outlined in green here, the probes have also touched 53 foreign nationals, including 39 people with direct ties to Russia. The list includes, interestingly enough, Christopher Steele, who, of course, does not have... is he listed as having direct ties to Russia? I mean, he kind of does. But I don't think that's what they mean. In other words, are they Russian right now? I think is what they're talking about here. But Christopher Steele counts as a foreign national involved in this situation. Natalia Veselnitskaya, of course, we remember her, and Sergei Kislyak, former Russian ambassador to the United States. So far, the majority of those involved, 172 of the people involved in the situation here, have a role in inquiries concerning alleged Russian outreach and connections to Trump. Relatively few, just 43, have been touched by the parallel probes into potential obstruction of justice by the president or those close to him. That would necessarily be the case, I think. And they have an explanation of their methodology, a chance to explore all of the 270 names on the list. It's filterable by various categories. I recommend it to you. You should absolutely take a look. Let's take a random stab in the various. Oh, look at this! If you click on look at the all 270 people, you get them alphabetically by last name, of course, starting with Emin Agalarov, and then his Aras appears right alongside him. So I guess I question their their sorting. But I guess that makes sense, of course, to have them side by side. Julian Assange making an appearance here. Let's just thumb through a couple of these folks. Definitely some names that I don't recognize. So well worth taking a look at and getting the whole roster, if not committed to memory, then at least get familiar with others. Maria Butina, the Russian pro-gun activist close to Alexander Torshin, who befriended Washington conservatives and reportedly tried in 2016 to help arrange a Trump-Putin meeting. Boy, oh boy. All our favorite folks are included in that list. Let's catch up also with some of the comments and questions that have come in on the KITM hashtag via Twitter during the show. The Warlock asking the question, I guess, about our shutdown situation. Is Chip in place yet? Yes. Chip was, as you may recall from the various updates we've gotten over the weeks from Joan McCarter, in place. I mean, it's an active program. It's just that it was running out of money and was being forced to begin mailing letters to people telling them that their benefits were going to run out. This appropriation puts money pretty much immediately in the pipeline, certainly close enough to finally being released to officials in the various states that they would likely be able to simply continue the program as is and send out perhaps a second round of notices saying, you've just been spared, and we got 6 years of funding to look forward to. That reminds me, by the way, that we had a question yesterday from Armando, who was asking about what happens if they appropriate $20 billion for the wall, whatever that's supposed to be, and they don't spend it all in a year. And it's slowly beginning to come back to me what they would do with that, and what sort of category that would fall into. I guess that would be what they call an unobligated appropriation. The fact that it was appropriated makes it available, in the pseudo bank of the Treasury, and as it becomes necessary to actually spend it, it is obligated by the Treasury. That portion of it which remains unobligated by the Treasury would be available for rescission, would be available for reprogramming, etc., in future budgets. So it doesn't disappear, it doesn't dry up. But then again, this crew is very likely to leave anything unobligated. I think the whole point of this administration is to pipe whatever they can out of the Treasury and into their own pockets as quickly as possible. So I guess we can keep an eye on it, but there's not much we can do to stop it, even if they don't actually build anything real with it. Let's see. Here's a comment from Meredith, who tweets, says, M. Ramsey 153. Meredith has this to say, Dems are not in control of the government. In my IMAO, in my what opinion? In my I don't know what the A is in net. But in my opinion, Republicans have telegraphed that they have no intention of normalizing any immigrant, let alone dreamers. The only remedy is to get democratic control of the government. So much winning, power, money, so much pain. Yes, that definitely stands in the way of getting what we want out of these guys. There's only sort of minimal leverage that you can use when A, you're not in control, and B, those who are in control don't appear at all concerned about propriety, legality, or maybe even getting reelected. I don't know. Let's see. We have Darwin Darko, chiming in on the disclosure front. Disclosures, yes, Kushner doesn't even have a clearance. I've had to go through the excruciating process twice in my Navy career and not to handle anything close to daily briefings. Yes, that also an issue that has come up in the last day or so. The expansive distribution of the ultra classified, ultra exclusive document, the Presidential Daily Briefing, apparently being distributed to something like 14 top officials in the Trump administration. I believe the list, after about 8 years in office, had expanded to 7 or so in the Obama administration, according to something I very quickly read in a discussion of all of this. And the fact that it's at 14 and that apparently the criterion being used here is if you are a very powerful person who can make this sort of thing work and you can get the president's attention in all of this, and you think it would be really cool to look at the Presidential Daily Briefing, that's really all it takes. Do you think it would be cool? Do you want it? Are you Jared Kushner? Fine, no problem. Oh, do you have no security clearance? You never finished with your financial disclosures? No problem. We'll just hand that over to you. Let's see. We have a couple other comments to zip through. Here comes Armando, who just warned me that he wanted in on the conversation. Oh, let's see. Oh, we missed his call here. Try again, Armando. I don't know why we would have missed your call. That was an awfully quick. Boy, oh boy. All right, come on. Oh, my mouse might not be working here. That could be the problem. All right, hang on there, Armando. We got to find our Skype and hit the right button. There we go. I think that'll do it. Hey, good morning, Armando.
David.
Hi,
hey.
there you are.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I was trying to press the answer the call button, but of course that now, as we say, everything's wrong with Skype, now lives at the top right corner of my screen, which is now covered up by the mouse battery very low notice that gets in the way of anything. So thanks for everybody for working together and positioning all of your alerts in the same place so that I can't get to any of the important functions. Okay. So, yes, we might as well get to this. I've been discussing a number of other things because I don't know. I mean, there's no solving how people are going to view this today. It's going to take some time to sort all of it out, although some people are pretty sure they're positive and totally justified in saying everybody is a spineless scumbag coward and to hell with all of you and there's no difference between the two parties again. But perhaps you have a different take on things.
I almost don't want to talk about that. I mean,
Yeah.
I actually have some more about strategy going forward. You know,
Might as well.
I will take just a minute to review what happened. As you recall, in the lead up to the shutdown day Friday, the DACA issue was being negotiated. Graham and Durbin had their deal at 10 one day. I forget the exact day, and they were going to the White House.
Yes.
They thought they had a deal with Trump, and then when they arrived, Cotton and Miller were there, and various other. I'll use the nicer phrasing: the immigration hardliners from the Republican people, and it blew up, and that was the famous S-hole day.
Yes.
And then Schumer went up the Friday, and he thought he could do a deal with Trump. So I think what happened, no one thought the shutdown strategy and messaging through. It sort of just stumbled into it. And I thought the messaging was not great. I didn't think it was once we were in it, I didn't see where it was going to lead to for Democrats, et cetera. Excuse me. So, it wasn't handled well. But excuse me.
Boy, it's a hell of a day out there.
Hell of a day. So anyway, the question to me, okay, so what do you do now is really the question. I mean, so the Democrats had a binary choice and did do this deal where you got a little extra from Friday, and that's really my measure of it, as opposed to I don't think the shutdown got you chip. I think it's fun to say that, or maybe the threat of a shutdown got you chip. So that might be fair, but the shutdown itself, chip was already in the CR. You could have just voted on the one the House passed, and it would have gone to February 15th. What's different? You got McConnell and people to make noise. You got people to focus on DACA for the next 17 days if you do it right. And this is really where my discussion of strategy goes, which is, what do you do now? Not just Democrats, activists. Last night, activists decided what you said. Everybody's the same, spineless, etc. I just don't see that as forwarding you to your goal. And I believe the goal is, in my view, is to posture our way, at the very least, to a decent DACA deal. And in this case, you have to understand what your opponents are about. What are Miller and Kelly, and I guess by extension Trump, trying to do here? Do they really want to block DACA? No, they want to hold it hostage and make you give them huge concessions on immigration policy. They want to end family repatriation, which is the actual term in the immigration statute, by the way, not chain migration. It's family repatriation. Chain migration is the death tax of immigration
yes, okay.
Discussions. And it's objectionable that the media calls it chain migration, and people should be fighting that. Family repatriation is what it is. That is, if you're working there and your brother wants to come, or your mother or your father or your children from another country, they apply, and they have to go through all the vetting, the famous vetting, the extreme vetting that all immigrants have to go through, and that's how you get it go. But so they want to, at the very least, restrict it tremendously. They want to go to what they call merit-based preference for immigration, and what that means is they want more white people, because that's what the essence of this discussion is, really at the heart of everything Donald Trump has ever been about. I talked about going to a Trump rally in March 2016 in Florida, and it was all about how horrible those brown immigrants are. And Stephen Miller made a speech at that event. And that was what he said. I mean, what they're arguing about now is what Stephen Miller gave a speech about in March 2016. And this is what this is about. So what do we want? We want DACA, and we don't want to give them anything, if possible, on immigration policy. Understand that if we said, screw you, we don't care about the Dreamers, which we're never going to say, but suppose we did, they can get anything out of us on immigration policy, and you know why they can't, right? 60 votes. 60 votes. So, in essence, DACA is their hostage. Our hostage is shut down. Which is the more valuable hostage is really the question. And I think you've got 17 days, both activists and Democratic legislators, to frame this debate as the Republicans breaking their promises to the Dreamers. Paul Ryan famously told the Dreamers at one of his earliest events after Trump became president, don't worry, we'll take care of you, which, of course, we're still waiting, Ryan. Trump, of course, took DACA hostage when he canceled the EO. I mean, there's another way out of this, if Trump was to give more time to negotiate, would be if Trump basically said, okay, you know that EO I did rescinding DACA, I'm going to rescind that EO and extend it for 6 more months.
Yeah.
But he's not going to do that because it's his hostage. But I think people need to educate themselves about this process. What is it that Democrats do? They can't pass laws straight up. We don't have a majority. We can't even bring a bill to the floor. We can't even do an amendment until now, as you described yesterday with McConnell. The Democrats have never had a single amendment other than those round robin amendments, voting things, the Voteramas. So we don't have anything else. So why is now the time to fight? Because you have them here. You may have them, I guess, with the debt ceiling. There's talk about these budget cap issues, which I don't fully understand. Maybe you do. But apparently that's considered a point of leverage for Democrats in the Senate. Again, the twin problem is you've got to get this to be about the Dreamers. And it's going to be easier now, it seems to me, because how did you settle the shutdown? Mitch McConnell's going to let a vote on DACA. He didn't say those exact words, but that's what I would say he said if I was a Democrat on TV or if I was an activist. But in that sense, the reaction of activists yesterday was just plain stupid. Bad strategy. If you think the Democratic leadership in the Senate had bad strategy on the shutdown, I tell you who has worse strategy yesterday, the activists. Instead of deciding to say, listen, we're disappointed that you didn't stand firm here, but we have another chance on February 8th. We need to make this about the Dreamers, and put forth all the promises, and Trump saying it, and every Republican insisting, oh, no, we want to pass DACA. And they said, well, then just pass it. Oh, no, but you've got to agree to this. Why should I have to agree to other things if you want to protect the Dreamers?
Yes.
And listen, you've heard those phrasings, but you haven't heard it as in a unified and frankly constant to the point of that's the only thing you hear from Democrats.
That is true.
Voice. Listen, it may work, it may not work. It's the only thing that can work. Now, so you play it out, it doesn't work, and they don't give you an acceptable deal. And it's February 8th. And McConnell breaks his promise and doesn't bring an acceptable DACA bill to the floor for a vote. What do? Do you shut down the government? At the very least, you should pretend you'll shut down the government. But you got to make it because they broke the promises to the Dreamers. Yeah. That's got to be your justification for it. And it's got to be something that even the New York Times can't miss.
Well, they can miss anything they like, of course. But
they do. But my point being, that's to me, that's how you argue the case. And activists need to, instead of deciding they're the worst things ever, the time is, and I think it's twofold in a way. If you're a Democratic legislator and you just tried, maybe ineptly, but you were trying to save the Dreamers, where the other side isn't trying, and all you do is just pile complete, vitriol on them. And that, at what point do you throw your hands up as a Democratic legislator? So there's nothing I can do to please these people. They don't understand that I can't hold. For example, Schumer. How long was he going to hold 41? Was he going to hold it long enough to get DACA and make the Republicans capitulate to that? I don't think so, and I assume he didn't think so. So what do you say to these people? Where people like Ezra Levin, who is one of these indivisible people, goes out and says, no, you got to keep in mind the Democrats agreed that wouldn't shut down the government on February 8th. They didn't agree to anything like that. So now you're making up falsehoods to attack them that undermines your position. That's not good strategy. That's dumb strategy. You think Schumer was inept. They are more inept than Schumer as activists, in my view. And I think they just enjoy the aspect of killing Democrats, and do they care about the issue? It seems to me is something that I can legitimately question. They care, but do they care enough to be smart about their strategy, or are they too in love with their outrage to think it through?
Well, like with many contentious issues, on which there is a rift between the most outspoken activists and the legislators who are supposed to be, implementing their agenda, to the extent that they agree that that's part of the agenda. We always have that. That the role of the activist, again, very often, is to be way out front on those issues and to make trouble and to be able to apply enough kinds of pressure in a serious enough way to command attention of the legislators. And it's entirely possible that behind the scenes somewhere there are people working for Schumer and other congressional leaders saying, listen, I understand why you have to do this, and I'm willing to take these lumps. This is what we're doing next. Don't change your strategy necessarily. Don't back off of taking a hard line on this. Although it might be nice if there weren't, necessarily people outside my house throwing garbage at me. That would be helpful. But to the extent you need to excoriate me in the press, I'm used to that for people like Chuck Schumer.
But I totally agree. I totally understand what you're saying, that the activist has a different role than the politician. I wrote a very long piece about that. And I used the historical figures of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln.
You and Ted Cruz.
Did he?
No, he was. I guess he was talking to Robert Costa, I think, the other day, and saying, I wrote a whole book about shutdowns and shutdown strategy. And Costa said, I know, I have it. And
is that right?
Yeah, and I guess Cruz took that as an insult. What do you mean you have it? You either say, I know, I read it, or I never heard of that. Not I have it. It's a book. It's a paperweight. He
got insulted. Oh, but did you open it?
Yeah, right.
No,
Ted Cruz wrote it.
I wish Ted Cruz was the leader on the other side. That would have. It's like, to me, you've got to find a villain here, and that's why I actually strategically I'd be going after Stephen Miller and Tom Cotton, because I think they are incredibly unlikable.
Yes.
And I know unlikable, believe me. So the point is that, okay, let's take that. The activist role is different. What should the activists be doing? Attacking them or trying to pressure them to hold the line? If that's what you think they should do on February 8th, when McConnell breaks his word.
Well, of course, there are also different sorts of activists out there, and each one very often speaking for themselves. There are going to be people who, with an eye toward forcing them to hold the line, will be excoriating them. And then there will be people who are excoriating them because they actually do truly hate them and think they need to be replaced, with whom I don't know.
And there's a third kind of activist, and this isn't everybody, but that saying mean things about Democrats helps your fundraising.
Yes, there is a lot out there, and a lot of people work in that space. I mean, there's a lot of disappointed and angry people, and I mean, disappointed is like the most. It's not even the right word to use because it's way too mild for what they're feeling.
Despondent,
upset. And they want a forceful response from their activist leaders that, I'm just holding his feet to the fire. I even want to put the feet directly into the fire for just a little while, and that's good. I'm glad about that. And if it causes them to cough up $5, it's success.
I can live with all that, but at least do that intelligently. Say, call your senator and tell them that if no DACA, no CR on February 8th.
Yeah. Oh,
you see what I'm saying? I didn't see February 8th mentioned by any of them. It's not 6 months from now. It's 3 weeks from now. 17 days, less than 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Well, that may
days,
yet follow, and I assume that we'll be able to separate the various strata of activists that way. In the next 3 days or so, those emails will begin to arrive in people's mailboxes, and once you see them and can credit them for it, You'll know who you're dealing
with. I get that email from the guy who just told me that it was over and they sold us out.
Yes. We're about 20 seconds away.
Why don't I just say to you, but you just told me they sold them out and they're useless, so why am I wasting my time?
That will happen.
With you.
Yeah. There are people who will, that'll backfire for a certain percentage of the activist groups, no doubt. As a matter of fact, well, speaking of backfiring for a little bit, we got to take our next break. Okay. Hang on for just a second.
Actually, I'll let you go. I'll let you keep on the issue. Thanks for just 10 minutes of this, because I just wanted to put that out there that everybody needs to have a strategy.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. And send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, had to take a little bit of an extended break there as we fumbled around trying to get the mouse recharged, but that's not... looks like it can't actually happen and still have the mouse function, and so that's a little bit of a drawback. We're going to have to add that to the list now. Every morning, make sure your mouse has enough charge. I even turn the thing off when I'm not using it, too. Kind of annoying. Let's see. Let's see. Perhaps I can charge it over the next couple of minutes when I don't think I will be in need of the mouse, since I won't have to play any music, and we can still use keyboard commands to do that. Anyway, what a morning. Really enjoying all of the technical difficulties we have to deal with. Yeah, let's see. There's another question pending, by the way, as we have another listener. Is Walezonia, is that, I'm looking at that, tweeting under the name of unintelligible, Walezonia, asking the question, is the delay in the Senate of any value when the House will have to pass a new bill to end up with an acceptable DACA deal? No reason for Ryan to help out. What's the leverage on the GOP? And it's not entirely clear, and it's not guaranteed to work in any sense. But one, you weren't likely to get, the Republicans weren't going to move on DACA at this point, and the shutdown would have dragged on, and that's not necessarily such a terrible thing, and it might possibly have been eventually parlayed to the Democrats' advantage in all of this. But I guess I can certainly understand the argument for a brief pause in the shutdown in order to give Democrats the opportunity to regroup and be clear about what their messaging heading into a shutdown, if there's another one in February, is going to be, and that we didn't perhaps properly prepare for this one. And I'm not certain on whose shoulders that one rests exactly. It was pretty clear that it was going to be coming, and the messaging ought to have been made clear heading into this shutdown. There's no reason in the world why it couldn't have been. But does the delay give us any advantage going into the next round? Does it help get Ryan to the table? Not the delay itself, although it's possible that in the game of dealing with public opinion, those who are not entirely clued into every nuance of shutdown or every nuance of the DACA fight and who has made which turns where in all of this, it's possible that coming back at it a second time around with, for instance, the chip issue removed from the situation and a unified or perhaps at least more organized Democratic front heading into the next shutdown, if there's going to be one, might be able, if not to actually move Ryan or give him a reason to help out, might put him in a less advantageous position in defending the Republican position on the shutdown next time around. It's all a crapshoot. It might not work. That's definitely true. And it might not even in hindsight turn out that Democrats had such lousy positioning this time around compared to what we're likely to see next time around. It may end up being largely the same. I'm not certain. I wasn't a big fan of ending the shutdown quite so rapidly, but clearly, if you're dealing with shaky troops in the Senate, it may very well be that there are some in the Senate who were less than courageous in their stance in this shutdown. And when the margins are razor thin, you gotta, like as they say, go to war with the troops you have, not the troops you may wish to have, or whatever it was that the way Rumsfeld put it. You're gonna have some Democrats in the Senate, and it only takes a very few who are going to make it extraordinarily difficult to hold the line with any sort of tough position. And as the vote counters in the Senate, you'll know sooner than anybody else when that line is approaching and what it means and how long you can hold out in a shutdown under circumstance A, when there is, in fact, as Armando pointed out, it's not necessarily such a huge strategic victory that we wrestled chip reauthorization or funding, I guess, out of Republicans if they were willing to do it and it was already in the CR. The problem, though, was we couldn't get to and approve of that CR without some additional bargaining, jockeying, and taking up the pulse of the country and the rest of the Congress and the PR machine, both in the White House and in both houses of Congress and as among the parties, and finding out what sort of leverage did we really have in all of this. And if you find out that there are shaky members of your Senate caucus, for instance, Doug Jones, who would be able to stand with you briefly under the current circumstances, but for longer and with greater conviction if CHIP were funded next time around, if that was taken care of and taken off the table, and you could head into a longer-term shutdown with a more stable lineup of Democrats in their razor-thin margins. Next time around, if we took a brief pause, showed that there was some good faith on the Democratic side to get the government reopened as certain problems were solved, but that issues remain, and this being our only leverage to get you to address them, that this seems like a much more reasonable approach afterwards. And there's a lot of posturing going on. And seeming reasonable is a necessity for some of these senators, and they're going to do it. Yes, there was CHIP funding in the current CR, but the current CR was unacceptable on the DACA front. And so a different one gets put forward, a short-term one that doesn't address DACA and the Dreamers, but does address bringing forward the CHIP funding. Because as it was being handed to us from the House, it was, yes, CHIP funding and horrific on DACA. So instead, we have status quo plus CHIP funding and freeze on DACA. Granted, we freeze on the horrible Republican position, which is not likely to change between now and then, but you can't just grab, there was no available vehicle to just grab the CHIP funding but also not do something terrible on DACA. That was the only option there was, besides continue to let DACA linger and continue to let CHIP wither on the vine. Somebody had to grab that CHIP money and plug it in and then say, we're coming back now on DACA. And there will be other issues too, and you have to decide whether you're going to focus on any of them or whether you're going to make it exclusively about DACA and the Dreamers, which, might work out to your advantage. We'll see. But, there are some real questions about how to do things and what vehicles are available to us, and will this work and will it not? And we don't know how the next round is going to go. But we know that sitting here waiting around on this round, holding out for a DACA fix, means CHIP continues to wither. Yes, the funding was there. No, that wasn't a brand new concession anybody brought up, but it was sitting in a bill that was unacceptable. We got it separated out of the bill that was unacceptable, plugged into a neutral vehicle, passed, put in place, and leave the DACA fight for the next day. That sucks if you're fearing deportation imminently, but if you're one of the 9 million that needed that funding for CHIP to be pulled out of the poison pill bill and put into something cleaner, then perhaps you're happy about it. It's just that you aren't going to show up and pat your legislators on the back in the face of overwhelming anger from activists on the Dreamer front with whom you're allied and with whom you want to be able to express sympathy and continued support. You can't take a victory lap on CHIP, in your face, we got our money. That's not going to help anything in terms of your intersectionality. You say, yeah, this is bad. This is a horrible thing. You need to apply pressure. Some people are going to be motivated to call their congresspeople out of anger, and some out of panic, and some out of strategery, and we got to find the best possible mix for all that. Some activists will alienate their base. Some activists will lead their base forward in a way that will alienate them from the Democratic caucuses that are going to be working hard to find a solution going forward. And, we'll find out. We'll separate the wheat from the chaff that way, I guess, and see what happens. And those who go too far in their threats and cajoling will find themselves, less than properly regarded, let's say, in the next round of discussions with congressional leaders. Or congressional leaders will get over it and say, I take my lumps. That's what I do. That's the job. I'm not too worried, but I want to put out there the thought that, this doesn't necessarily define our entire relationship going forward, and you should be willing to be somewhat flexible, perhaps a little bit more flexible in private than you are in public. And we also need to say the same thing from the other side. Some of the activists who are taking the most strident positions are doing so for strategic reasons rather than that being their true belief that there is no, say, difference between the two parties. And then there'll be people out there who say, hey, I'm angry and I'm strident about it, but I never said there was no difference between the two parties. Don't lump me in with that. I can't. You're right. I shouldn't be lumping you in. There's lots of positions out there, and maybe that's one of the problems. But first, at the moment, we're all competing for ways to find messaging that can be carried forward by all of us. All right, let's see. Oh, thanks. Some solutions for the mouse problems. Order a new one that plugs in, and voila, no battery problems. Hint, don't do an Apple mouse. Well, I've got an Apple setup here, and I guess I can do a non-Apple mouse on the Apple setup, but the physical limits of my setup, I think, make it desirable to have a wireless mouse. So, okay, we don't really need to spend any time discussing that on the show. But thank you for that suggestion. More on point from the same person here, Jack Ox, who adds, I sure hope you're right about more leverage next time in 2+ weeks. But do you honestly think the corporate Dems, I see, here's where we get into a problem. The corporate Dems have spine enough to pull this off in the face of the horrible GOP. Yes, there's nothing else to do in the face of the horrible GOP. The only issue is at the margins, do corporate Dems, whatever they might be, have the spine to pull it off? Well, you know what helps increase their spine is if you take away their biggest problems with participating in the shutdown, you can find out anyway whether they have spine or not. It may turn out that they don't, but at the moment, If you ask, what does it take to keep you on our team when the going really gets rough? If they say, fund Chip, get that done, I can take that home and say I did that, and the rest of it is fighting for my friends. Then you take them at their word, try it, and if they don't show up for the fight, you know what happens next time. But for the time being, you tell me what's the correct read on where Doug Jones is going to be. You tell me what we know about Doug Jones and how resolute he'll be in all of this, based on what? Based on nothing, because we don't have very much to read about what kind of senator he's going to be. He hasn't been one. We don't know. We hope for the best, but if I ask him, what does it take to get you on board? The answer that he gives is the only one I've got to work with. That's all the data I've got. Warlock was asking whether the CHIP is for only 1 year. I don't think so. I think the CHIP funding is the 6-year deal. It should have been 10, as Joan was telling us. You actually save something in the order, was it $6 billion she put out there as the figure, by extending it for 10 years, whereas it's simply revenue neutral and or free if you do 6 years. So in a sense, you can, of course, say, how much is the Republican Party willing to light on fire just to make sure that we don't do anything excessively good for CHIP recipients? The answer is they will light $6 billion on fire to make sure that the agreement goes only 6 years instead of 10. So let's see. Yeah, Armando says CHIP is a 6-year deal. That was the one that they were. That's the deal that was in place in the CR in the House version with the horrible DACA provisions, and it got carried over and taken on here. Let's see, Jack. One more. So it could go 1 year. Warlock is saying, I don't know what you mean. It could go 1 year. It couldn't. I mean, it could. You could pass legislation, repealing the CHIP program, I guess, and then defund it from there. But the deal that they pulled over from the House CR is a 6-year one. Let's see, Jack commenting here. Okay, you got me. Will not attack Dems. Will support them. See? Good argument gets me every time. See? That's all you have to do. It's all fixed now. Jack's okay. Well, yeah, now you got to go out and talk with others and see if you can get them to be a bit more measured in their private discourse, if not necessarily the public discourse. I leave a lot of room for passion, let's say, especially in in an issue in which your entire life can be wrapped up. We have to understand that. More technical issues. Arliss Bunny says the Apple trackpad does work while charging. Yes, that's a good point. Of course, it was more expensive than the mouse, so I went with the mouse thing, thinking I'm more comfortable with that. And the trackpad takes up such a large part of my desk space. But I think I can probably just avoid the issues from here on and just charge the mouse once a week, I think, is all it's going to take. Okay. Warlock says the Republicans could defund CHIP next year. Yes, there's always the possibility that the Republicans could try to pass a bill defunding CHIP. But then they could always try to pass a bill naming Trump dictator for life, too. And I don't think the chances are any less that they would do that, by the way, than defunding CHIP. But one of the things that you'd have to count on is, they have greater priorities than that. I mean, they could pass a bill purporting to do anything. They could. That's just true. They could defund anything. They could decide that they are going to defund the United States military and merge it with the Russian military. They could decide that. It would just be extraordinarily unpopular. One of the reasons that a 6-year re-up, not reauthorization, I don't want to use that term of art, but 6-year funding of CHIP was in the bill in the first place is, even with Republicans, it's a pretty popular program. So they absolutely could do that. Now, he says the gentleman's agreement is not enforceable. That's always somewhat true, but this isn't a gentleman's agreement. 6 years of appropriations for CHIP is not the same thing as a handshake or a gentleman's agreement. It's law. I mean, they could repeal that law. That's absolutely true. But I guess we would never be able to discuss anything intelligibly if we included all possibilities in every single discussion. We include an awful lot of them. But, for instance, they could do the same with DACA. Suppose we had put them over a barrel and just killed them on the PR. And Trump said, you know what? I want out of this thing. I don't care about you guys in the Congress. We are going to reauthorize this program. We're giving DACA protection to everybody who lost it. I rescind my rescission of the DACA orders. And I urge you, as a matter of making America great again, Republicans, to codify the DACA policy as law. And he could do that. And then the next day he could say, I changed my mind again, repeal that. Is it a victory if you get it in the first place? Yeah. Is it repealable later by a mercurial idiot who's president? Yeah. So why discuss anything? Why should we discuss a path to citizenship in any capacity, in any way, shape, or form, if it can, quote, just be repealed a year later? I don't know. You tell me. Mostly because we have to make decisions at some point. We have to try to govern at some point. We do. They don't. But if you negotiate with people and try to find a path to citizenship with the idea in the back of your mind that this can all be unplugged later, so why bother in the first place? Okay, I won't bother in the first place. And now what has the ultimate cynicism bought you, right? So say you're a passionate activist who believes that corporate Democrats have no spine, et cetera, et cetera. All right, fine. They don't. They're not going to help you. Bye. Oh, well, we'll replace you with people who will. That'll change everything. Oh, well, that can be repealed too. They can change their minds also. Don't tell me you haven't seen a politician promise you item A, get elected, and then not bother with following through on item A. Don't tell me you've never seen that happen before. So what's your proposal? What's the solution to all this? Everybody can always change their minds. Everything can always be repealed. Nothing is ever enforceable. That's right. And what do you do with that? I don't know what the answer is. If you really believe that everything can ultimately be undone, then you do nothing. You're an anarchist and you wait for whatever comes your way. And you invest everything in Bitcoin and hope that some sort of future tech utopia will answer all your questions. One in which nothing is ever rescindable and we're stuck with every decision in perpetuity, no matter what, forever. And future Congresses can, in fact, be bound by the decisions of the current Congress. Suppose we pass this thing. Suppose we pass a law that says DACA is federal law in perpetuity, and it is here henceforth to be considered illegal to even reconsider the DACA program in any way, shape, or form, even to make it stronger. We're just locking it in. The next Congress says, yeah, you can't do that. That's actually unconstitutional, and we're going to make a change. Oh, that's our system? Dang. Now what? I don't want to go overboard on you, but at some point, you have to say, well, look, a decision needs to be made, and we have to reach some kind of conclusion here. We pass a law. We assume it's going to stay on the books rather than assume it's going to be repealed, and that's the way it works. Could it be repealed? Could you prove me wrong? Sure. But I think anybody could be proven wrong under these circumstances. If this is the rules of the game, anything can be undone, then nobody's right about anything, including you. So I don't know where that gets us. But I think we've played our hand out on that one and can probably move on. We've eaten up a bunch of the show doing things that way. At any rate, okay, it is now approaching end of the line here for the day. And let's see, what other things did I open up that I thought were important when the show opened and then we didn't get to? Yes. Among the various things to which Donald Trump, President of the United States, unfortunately, is not paying any attention besides the situation in Alaska, well, there's this. He's setting himself up for accessory to murder at some point. that would be problematic, I think. Don't forget that Donald Trump candidate, though he's distancing himself from Donald Trump president, how that happens, I don't know. But he insists, or the White House is insisting, why they have nothing to do. It's an outside group airing the commercial that says Democrats are complicit in any murder committed by an illegal immigrant, whatever that may be. This is, of course, the broadest possible extension. If you are for giving people a path to citizenship while they're still illegal, if they were to commit a murder, that would be your fault. Well, that's a pretty broad brush, and it unfortunately makes it impossible to escape accessory to murder when you spend every waking moment telling everybody that CNN is fake news, and it leads a wacko somewhere to conclude that he ought to drive down to Atlanta and murder everybody at the CNN headquarters, which is apparently what was going on here. We've found this here. I got the Detroit Free Press's report on the man from Novi, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that one right, Michigan, who decided just that. This man is arrested, allegedly threatening CNN employees for fake news. How could he possibly have been driven to that? Hashtag surveyors marks, I guess, would answer your question on that. And Novi, any idea? Michiganders tell me what to do with that one. Man was arrested last week and now faces federal criminal charges following an FBI investigation. FBI, those guys are full of it. Everybody hates the FBI, says Donald Trump, right? No, this time they saved us from a terrorist attack, but it's not terrorist because the guy's white, et cetera, et cetera. And Donald Trump wouldn't be accessory to any murders that happen at CNN because he was just kidding about that whole fake news thing. It wasn't his fault, and it isn't his fault that this other individual decided to do this crazy-ass thing. But then that's about as invalid a conclusion that he is responsible as his television commercial makes about Democrats. But so what? That's about Democrats, so it works. If it's about Republicans, go screw yourself. All right, so the guy was picked up on federal charges. The FBI alleging that he called CNN headquarters multiple times with threats to, quote, gun down employees of the network for producing, quote, fake news. According to a criminal complaint unsealed Friday in U.S. District Court on January 9th, Brandon Griesmer, I don't know how he's pronouncing this, G-R-I-E-S, Griesmer, M-E-R, G-R-I-E-S-E-M-E-R, allegedly called a publicly listed contact for CNN. When the operator answered, he said, fake news, I'm coming to gun you all down. I don't know whether the threat was supposed to be fake news or he was just yelling at them for being fake news. Anyway, you'll be super shocked to find out that this young guy in his career, such as it was, calling in various threats to people, has also made anti-Muslim remarks, has made anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish remarks. By the way, anti-Semitism could conceivably cover both Arabs and Jews, but okay. Anti-black remarks, believe it or not. And golly gee whiz, it's an unusual combination to see anywhere, both hatred for Muslims, Jews, and CNN as fake news. I wonder where he could be getting his motivation from. All very dangerous and good reminders of the extremism encouraged and cultivated in this country by Donald Trump and his supporters, and you ought to hold them accountable for it and keep that in mind, and keep an eye on the weirdo Nazis that seem to be running everything inside the White House and out. Okay, time now for us to hand the microphone over for the day to Justice Putnam. He won't even make hardly any of the mistakes that I made with my buttons and settings today. We don't know exactly how to smooth all of that stuff out. These things just crop up along the way, and you got to deal. Anyway, if you want to deal with what's coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, I can tell you, starting off in their Bistro Cafe, the FBI says that House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes won't share that infamous memo, in fact, alleging FBI abuses of surveillance laws despite sharing it with members of Congress. And that's because he made all the crap up and it has no sourcing. Then, I would say, on the rest of the menu, the man Trump chose to lead the FBI was willing to risk his job to defend FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe from a Trump-led effort to fire him. You all remember that, and I guess that's good news. Trump's paralyzing tariffs on solar imports will kill clean energy jobs in the near and long term, and Oregon voters will decide whether to tax insurers and hospitals to keep low-income people covered. All that and more coming up. I'll tell you a little more after
From
this.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Don't forget what goes on after the break at the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I very rarely get a chance to actually fit that in, but all the good esoterica and analysis comes then as well. This time an analysis of what happens when you trust Mitch McConnell, because history shows trusting Mitch McConnell can be a fool's errand. You know that. He'll tell you more about it after this.